the shadow and the spark. Nathaniel Porter couldn't stand inefficiency. The award-winning architect moved through Horizon Design Associates like a storm cloud, his perpetually furrowed brow and impeccable charcoal suits creating a perimeter of silence wherever he went. At 36, he'd earned his corner office through precision, determination, and an unwavering commitment to perfection that left little room for small talk or workplace camaraderie. "Morning, Nathaniel." The voice was bright, musical, and entirely too enthusiastic for 7:45 a.m. on a Tuesday. He stiffened, nodding curtly without looking up from his tablet as he strode past the reception area. Dahlia Reyes, the firm's newest landscape designer, had been with Horizon for exactly 3 weeks and 2 days, long enough for Nathaniel to have developed an allergic reaction to her perpetual cheerfulness. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" she continued, apparently immune to his obvious disinterest. "The jacarandas along Monroe Street are blooming early this year." Nathaniel paused despite himself, glancing toward the window. Purple blossoms. How would he miss them on his drive in? He caught himself and straightened his shoulders. "I hadn't noticed." Dahlia smiled, undeterred. "They're worth a look during lunch. I could show you my favorite spot." "I have a client meeting," he interrupted, though no such appointment existed. "And the Westbrook proposal due by 5. Her smile dimmed only slightly. "Another time, then." In the sanctuary of his office, Nathaniel exhaled. Dahlia Reyes was a disruption to his carefully calibrated environment. With her colorful scarves, her habit of leaving inspirational quotes on the break room whiteboard, and worst of all, her insistence on seeing the good in everything, even in him, she represented everything frivolous that Nathaniel had worked so hard to eliminate from his life. "She won't last 6 months," he muttered to his empty office. Architecture was precision and mathematics, not feelings and purple flowers. But as April turned to May, Dahlia not only remained at Horizon, but thrived. Her innovative landscape designs complemented the structural elements of several major projects, earning praise from clients and grudging respect from the senior partners. Even more irritating to Nathaniel, everyone seemed drawn to her. From the usually taciturn security guard to Vivian, the stern office manager who had never been seen smiling in the 7 years Nathaniel had known her. "We're heading to Riverside for happy hour," announced Theodore from the doorway of Nathaniel's office one Friday. "The whole team's going. Dahlia's idea." Nathaniel didn't look up from his drafting table. "I have revisions to complete. Come on, Porter." "All work and no play." "Produces award-winning designs," Nathaniel finished. "Enjoy your beverages." That night, as the office emptied and silence settled around him, Nathaniel found himself distracted. His thoughts kept drifting to laughter he imagined echoing through Riverside Tavern, to conversations flowing as freely as the drinks, to Dahlia, probably at the center of it all, drawing people in with that inexplicable light she carried. The following Tuesday, Nathaniel arrived earlier than usual to find Dahlia already at her desk, head bent over sketches, her usual vibrant scarf replaced by something muted and gray. She didn't look up when he passed. No cheerful greeting, no comment about the weather or the flowers or whatever small delight she'd normally have noticed. He told himself it was a relief. By Thursday, the change was unmistakable. Dahlia moved through the office quietly, her usual animation replaced by a focused efficiency that should have pleased Nathaniel, but instead left him oddly unsettled. No whiteboard quotes appeared. The container of homemade cookies that often materialized in the break room remained absent. "What's wrong with Reyes?" he finally asked Theodore as they reviewed building materials for the Westbrook project. Theodore's eyebrows shot up. "You haven't heard?" Her younger brother was in a serious motorcycle accident on Sunday. "They don't know if he'll walk again?" Something cold and uncomfortable settled in Nathaniel's chest. He thought of his own brother, the only family he had left, living across the country. "That's unfortunate," he managed. "Yeah, she's been visiting him every night after work. Hospital's all the way across town." Theodore shook his head. "Never seen her without a smile before this week?" "Feels wrong somehow." Nathaniel found himself watching her through his office window that afternoon. The sunshine that usually seemed to emanate from within her had dimmed, leaving behind someone he hardly recognized. and with a jolt of uncomfortable self-awareness, Nathaniel realized he missed the person he'd spent months actively avoiding. Broken light. The hospital smell hit Nathaniel first, antiseptic and artificial, nothing like the natural scents Dahlia often described in her landscape presentations. He stood awkwardly in the doorway of room 317, a paper cup carrier in one hand, a folder of printouts in the other. "Nathaniel?" Dahlia looked up from her chair beside the bed, surprise etching across her tired features. In the bed, a young man lay sleeping, his legs suspended in a complex arrangement of metal and bandages. "I brought coffee," Nathaniel said, the words sounding stiff and inadequate. "And, these." He held up the folder. "Some articles on innovative physical therapy techniques. My brother had a rock climbing accident 5 years ago. These helped." Dahlia blinked rapidly, accepting the coffee with a small nod. "This is unexpected." "Theodore mentioned—" Nathaniel cleared his throat. I noticed you weren't quite yourself." A ghost of her familiar smile flickered across her face. "You noticed me?" The question carried no accusation, just genuine surprise that made Nathaniel's ears burn. Of course he'd noticed her. He'd spent months actively trying not to notice her, which was, he now realized, its own form of attention. "How is he doing?" Nathaniel asked, gesturing toward her brother. "Raphael has good chances," she said softly. "But it's a long road ahead. Our parents are both gone, so it's just us." Nathaniel pulled up a chair, surprising himself as much as Dahlia. "Tell me what the doctor said." For the next hour, Nathaniel listened as Dahlia explained Raphael's injuries, the surgeries, the prognosis. He asked questions, took notes, and made suggestions based on his brother's experience. When Raphael stirred awake, Nathaniel witnessed the genuine warmth with which Dahlia cared for him, the same warmth she'd offered to everyone at Horizon, including Nathaniel, who had rebuffed it at every turn. "You didn't have to come," Dahlia said as they walked toward the parking garage later, "but I'm glad you did. I'm sorry I haven't been receptive to your friendliness," Nathaniel admitted, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. "It's not personal." Dahlia studied him in the fluorescent lights of the garage. "It is personal, though, isn't it? Being closed off is just as personal a choice as being open." Her insight struck him like a physical blow. "I suppose you're right." The next day, at work, Nathaniel found himself aware of Dahlia's movements in a new way. She arrived late, her eyes shadowed from another night at the hospital. She worked quietly, efficiently, but without the spark that had once infused everything she touched. When she disappeared at lunch, Nathaniel found himself walking to the break room, erasing the faded, inspirational quote on the whiteboard and replacing it with his own awkward message, thinking of Raphael. "Let us know what you need. Horizon Team." By afternoon, a sign-up sheet had appeared beneath his message, with time slots for hospital visits and meal deliveries. Nathaniel's name was conspicuously absent, and he told himself it was because he'd already visited, not because the thought of group activities made his skin crawl. "You started this," Theodore said, appearing at Nathaniel's office door and gesturing toward the sign-up sheet now covered in signatures. "It seemed appropriate," Nathaniel replied, not looking up from his computer. "Didn't think you noticed anything that wasn't made of concrete and steel." Nathaniel frowned. "That's not fair. I noticed plenty." "Like what?" Theodore challenged, leaning against the doorframe. Nathaniel opened his mouth, then closed it. What did he notice? Deadlines, errors, inefficiencies? But had he noticed the jacarandas blooming? Or that Vivian had started wearing colorful scarves similar to Dahlia's? Or that the office atmosphere had changed since Dahlia's arrival, becoming somehow lighter? "I noticed that Dahlia's brother needs support," he finally said. "And that she does too." Theodore nodded slowly. "Progress, Porter. There might be hope for you yet. That weekend, Nathaniel found himself driving to the hospital again, this time with architectural magazines and a sketchbook for Raphael, who Dahlia had mentioned was studying engineering. The young man was awake, his dark eyes, so like his sister's, wary but curious. "You're the robot architect," Raphael said when Dahlia introduced them. "The one who never smiles." "Raphael," Dahlia admonished, but Nathaniel surprised himself by laughing. "I've been called worse," he admitted, setting the magazines on the bedside table. "Your sister mentioned you're interested in structural engineering." While Dahlia went to find coffee, Nathaniel and Raphael discussed tensile strength and load-bearing calculations, finding unexpected common ground. When Dahlia returned, she paused in the doorway, watching them with an expression Nathaniel couldn't quite read. "You two seem to be getting along," she observed, handing Nathaniel a cup. "Your brother has good instincts," Nathaniel said. "He asked about the cantilever problem on the Westbrook project. The one you've been obsessing over for weeks?" Dahlia's eyebrows rose. "Did he solve it?" "Not yet," Raphael grinned weakly. "But I will if he brings the blueprints next time." Next time. The words hung in the air, an assumption Nathaniel realized he didn't mind. "I might be persuaded," he said. As they left that evening, Dahlia touched Nathaniel's arm lightly. "Thank you. He hasn't been that engaged since the accident." "He's bright." It was. Enjoyable. Dahlia studied him. "You know, you're different outside the office. Less." "Robotic?" Nathaniel supplied dryly. "Guarded," she corrected. "Why is that?" The question was direct, piercing through the careful barriers Nathaniel had constructed over years. Standing in the purple dusk of the hospital parking lot, he found himself wanting to answer honestly. "Excellence requires focus," he said finally. "And focus requires distance." "Does it?" Dahlia challenged gently. "Or is that just what you've told yourself?" Nathaniel had no answer, but as he drove home, her question echoed. He thought about the precise, controlled life he'd built, free from distractions and complications. He thought about Dahlia's infectious joy, now dimmed by genuine hardship. And he thought about how, despite his best efforts to remain detached, he'd ended up in a hospital parking lot, having conversations that had nothing to do with architecture and everything to do with being human. For the first time in years, Nathaniel Porter admitted to himself that perhaps, just perhaps, he had designed his life with a fundamental flaw in its foundation. Growing season. "You brought flowers," Dahlia said, surprise coloring her voice as Nathaniel entered Raphael's hospital room the following Saturday. Nathaniel glanced down at the modest arrangement of purple blooms in his hand, feeling suddenly self-conscious. "Jacarandas, from Monroe Street." Raphael, propped up in bed and looking marginally better than the week before, snorted. "Smooth, robot man." "They're beautiful," Dahlia said, accepting them with a genuine smile, the first real one Nathaniel had seen in weeks. "How did you know they're my favorite?" "You mentioned it," Nathaniel said simply, remembering that morning weeks ago when he'd brushed past her greeting. "That day you offered to show me where they were blooming." Something shifted in Dahlia's expression. Surprise, perhaps, that he had been listening after all. Over the next 3 weeks, a new pattern emerged. Nathaniel visited the hospital regularly, bringing architectural challenges for Raphael and occasionally, awkwardly, small tokens for Dahlia, a particular tea she'd once mentioned liking, a book on Japanese garden design, little acknowledgments that, yes, he had been paying attention all along. At Horizon, he found himself making small changes. He left his office door open. He joined the team for lunch occasionally. He even found himself defending one of Dahlia's more experimental landscape proposals to the senior partners when she was absent for Raphael's surgery. "Since when do you care about creating emotional resonance through natural elements?" Theodore asked afterward, mimicking Nathaniel's earlier passionate argument. Nathaniel straightened his tie uncomfortably. It's a solid design, innovative. Uh-huh, Theodore smirked. Nothing to do with who created it. Don't you have work to do? Nathaniel deflected, retreating to his office where he stared unseeing at his computer screen, wondering when exactly Dahlia's perspective had begun infiltrating his own rigid worldview. When Raphael was finally released from the hospital, Nathaniel surprised himself by offering to help with the move to Dahlia's apartment. Her home was exactly as he might have imagined it, filled with plants, colorful textiles, and mismatched furniture that somehow worked together harmoniously. "It's not exactly minimalist architecture," she said, watching him take it all in. "It's very you," he replied, realizing he meant it as a compliment. As Raphael's recovery progressed, Nathaniel found excuses to remain in their orbit, driving Raphael to physical therapy when Dahlia couldn't leave work, helping adapt the apartment for easier mobility, bringing takeout on evenings when Dahlia looked particularly exhausted. "Why are you doing all this?" Raphael asked bluntly one afternoon while Dahlia was out getting groceries. Nathaniel paused in the middle of adjusting Raphael's ergonomic desk setup. "Pardon? Don't get me wrong, I appreciate it. But from what Dahlia told me about you before the accident, you were practically allergic to human interaction." Nathaniel considered the question with the same careful attention he gave to structural problems. "I've realized my approach was flawed," he said finally. "Because you like my sister," Raphael stated matter-of-factly. Heat crawled up Nathaniel's neck. "I respect her work and her perspective." Raphael rolled his eyes. "Right, and I'm walking tomorrow." When Dahlia returned, laden with grocery bags, she found them in surprisingly animated conversation about adaptive architecture. Something warm unfurled in her chest at the sight. Her brother engaged and argumentative, Nathaniel passionate and unguarded, both healing in their own ways. "The Dynamic Green Space Initiative," Vivian announced at the Monday morning meeting 2 weeks later. Horizon has been invited to submit a proposal for the city's new adaptive public space project. They're looking for innovative approaches to urban environments that can evolve with community needs. Nathaniel found himself looking across the conference table at Dahlia, who was already scribbling notes, her face lit with inspiration. For the first time in his career, his first thought wasn't about structural elegance or technical challenges, it was about collaboration. Dahlia should lead the landscape elements, he heard himself saying. The room fell silent. Nathaniel Porter never volunteered to share project control. Dahlia looked up, her pen paused mid-note. "I appreciate that, but this needs to be an integrated approach from the ground up." "Co-lead then," Nathaniel amended, ignoring Theodore's raised eyebrows. "Your adaptability, my structure?" "Working in tandem." The project became a turning point. Evenings found them working late at the office, Dahlia's living room, or occasionally Nathaniel's sleek apartment, which gradually accumulated plants, colorful sketches, and empty tea mugs, small infiltrations of Dahlia's world into his. "This doesn't make sense," Nathaniel frowned one night, studying their latest draft. "The central pavilion needs more support if we're including the water feature." Dahlia didn't argue. Instead, she handed him a marker and stepped back. "Show me." As he sketched his solution, she slipped away, returning minutes later to place a cup of tea at his elbow, prepared exactly as he liked it, though he couldn't recall ever telling her. "How did you know?" he asked, gesturing to the tea. Dahlia smiled, that full, radiant smile that had once irritated him and now felt like essential sustenance. "I noticed things too, Nathaniel." The night before their proposal submission, they worked until dawn at Dahlia's apartment, Raphael occasionally offering input from his increasingly mobile position on the couch. When the final renderings were complete, Dahlia impulsively hugged Nathaniel, the first time they had touched beyond casual contact. "We did it," she whispered against his shoulder. Nathaniel found himself returning the embrace, his usual stiffness melting away. "We did." Raphael made a theatrical gagging noise from the couch. "Get a room that's not my current bedroom, please." Dahlia laughed, pulling away with flushed cheeks. Nathaniel found himself missing her warmth immediately. 2 weeks later, Horizon won the contract. The celebration at Riverside Tavern found Nathaniel in unprecedented territory. accepting congratulations, participating in casual conversation, even laughing at Theodore's terrible jokes. Through it all, he remained aware of Dahlia across the room, her joy fully restored and somehow more profound than before, tempered by the difficult months, but no less genuine. "You're staring," Raphael said, appearing beside him with his walking cane. "I'm observing," Nathaniel corrected. "Call it whatever you want, robot man." Raphael's tone was affectionate now. "Just don't go back to avoiding her when things get too real." Nathaniel looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" "I mean my sister shines so bright sometimes it hurts to look directly at her. I've watched people turn away from that my whole life." Raphael's gaze was knowing, "including you, before." Later, as the celebration wound down, Nathaniel found himself walking with Dahlia along the river path behind the tavern. The spring air was warm, jacaranda petals drifting occasionally on the breeze. "We've come a long way from you ignoring my good morning," Dahlia observed, bumping her shoulder lightly against his. "I never ignored you," Nathaniel admitted quietly. "I just didn't know how to respond to everything you are." She stopped walking, turning to face him in the soft glow of the path lights. "And now? Now I know that precision and joy aren't mutually exclusive, that noticing purple flowers doesn't compromise structural integrity." He took a breath. "That sometimes the things we avoid are exactly what we need." Dahlia's eyes softened. "That's quite an architectural revelation, Mr. Porter." "I had an excellent co-designer," he said, reaching tentatively for her hand. As their fingers intertwined, Nathaniel thought about the dynamic green space they'd created together, a place designed to grow, adapt, and evolve while maintaining its core strength. Not unlike the unexpected connection between them, built slowly through hospital visits and late-night drafting sessions, through broken light and tentative regrowth. "Raphael says I was afraid of needing your light," Nathaniel said, the confession feeling both terrifying and liberating. "And were you?" Dahlia asked, her voice gentle but direct as always. Nathaniel looked at her, really looked at her, standing amid falling purple blossoms, her face open and waiting. "Yes," he admitted, "but I'm not afraid anymore." As he leaned down to kiss her, Nathaniel Porter, the man who had once built walls with the same precision he built buildings, finally understood what Dahlia had known all along, that the most beautiful structures are those that let the light in. Blueprint for balance. 6 months into their relationship, Nathaniel and Dahlia faced their first real challenge. The dynamic green space project had garnered national attention, bringing a prestigious firm from the East Coast, calling with an offer Nathaniel couldn't ignore: lead architect on an innovative museum complex. The catch: it was across the country. "You have to take it," Dahlia insisted, sitting on Nathaniel's couch, surrounded by the plants she'd gradually introduced into his once sterile apartment. "This is everything you've worked for." Nathaniel paced, uncharacteristically indecisive. "There are other projects." "Not like this," she countered. "And we both know it." The old Nathaniel would have already accepted, prioritizing career advancement without hesitation. But the man he'd become understood what he'd be leaving behind. Not just Dahlia, but the balance he'd finally found. "What if you came too?" he suggested, stopping his pacing. "Your sustainable landscape designs would be revolutionary there." Dahlia's expression softened. "Raphael's still in school here. His recovery is going well," Raphael interrupted, appearing in the doorway. "And I'm old enough to live without my sister hovering." He looked between them, leaning on his cane less than he had been last month. "You two built something good. Don't let geography be your structural flaw." After weeks of difficult conversations, compromise emerged. Nathaniel would take the position for 1 year, with Dahlia visiting regularly and contributing remotely to landscape elements. Meanwhile, she would establish her own design consultancy, creating a foundation for her eventual relocation after Raphael's graduation. "We're architects," Nathaniel told her at the airport. "We know good things take time to build properly." As their lips met in a goodbye that was really just a beginning, Nathaniel realized how completely his blueprint for life had changed and how much stronger the new design would be. Open concept. 2 years later, Nathaniel stood in the center of the completed museum complex, watching as final preparations were made for the grand opening. Through video calls, plane tickets, and countless shared design files, he and Dahlia had not only maintained their connection but strengthened it, proving that foundations built on understanding could withstand distance. His phone buzzed with a message from Dahlia. Just landed. Raphael insisted on driving from the airport. Brace yourself for his commentary on your structural choices. Nathaniel smiled. Remembering the brash young man who'd first called him Robot Man, and who now, fully recovered and nearly finished with his engineering degree, never missed an opportunity to critique his future brother-in-law's work. That evening, as the museum filled with dignitaries and press, Nathaniel found himself searching the crowd until he spotted them. Raphael in an actual suit, and beside him, Dahlia, radiant in emerald green, her face lighting up when their eyes met across the room. "There she is," murmured the museum director beside him. "The landscape architect everyone's talking about. Her vertical garden installation is revolutionary." Pride swelled in Nathaniel's chest. While he'd been designing the museum, Dahlia's consultancy had exploded in popularity, her sustainable approaches earning recognition that rivaled his own. Later, as they walked alone through the museum's central atrium, Dahlia's hand warm in his, Nathaniel paused beneath the glass ceiling where stars shone through. "I have something to ask you," he said, reaching into his pocket. Dahlia's eyes widened as he knelt, not with the stiffness of the man he'd once been, but with the openness of the man she'd helped him become. "You once asked if excellence requires distance," he said, holding up a simple ring with a small piece of jacaranda wood inlaid in the band. "I've learned it doesn't. It requires connection, balance, light." His voice steadied. "You?" As Dahlia pulled him to his feet with tears and laughter, kissing him beneath the stars and the soaring architecture they'd created together, Nathaniel Porter, once closed, rigid, and alone, embraced the beautiful truth that the strongest structures are those designed with room to grow, change, and love.